death by cow. So after, I love canyoneering. I love, hiking, camp, all that kind of stuff. And after college, I was playing on 3 soccer teams. I was on 2 indoor teams, 1 outdoor team. We're all sitting around hanging out one day, and one of my buddies, Scott, is talking about, we're sitting in the shade after playing, and he's talking about this canyoneering hike that he had done with a couple of friends. And the way that he described it was, they got stuck in a slot canyon. And, the part about them getting stuck in the slot canyon, obviously not cool. But what was cool was all of the description of how they got there. So, he was talking, rappelling down waterfalls and all these kinds of things that just sounded amazing. And so a couple of us were like, we're doing this. Let's do this weekend. Let's roll. And so myself, Chani, and Dan all managed to get everything together so that we could go try to do this hike down in just outside Zion National Park. And the interesting thing was despite what Scott had described, we started doing some research on what this hike was like. And, he was talking about double rope rappels, like, you need 2 ropes to even touch the bottom. Some of them you can't even touch the bottom, you have to drop off into the pool at the base, things like that. But when we went to look at all the guidebooks, and I went to talk to the people at REI, for example, and stuff like that, they literally said, one of the guidebooks literally said, your grandmother could do the one hand over hand rappel that you need for this hike. And so we still wanted to go, we still wanted to do it, but we started questioning, my friend Scott's, description of this hike. And it was one of those top down, it was one of those like carpool ferry hikes where you'd take 2 cars, you'd park 1 car at the top and 1 car at the bottom, and after a full day's hike you get back and you go back and get your car. So we get down to Zion National Park, and we're hanging out, we're camping. That morning we get up, I got up crack of dawn early. I went to the office to grab our permits so that we could get in, because I wanted to be the first one there so that we could make sure we could get the permits so that we could go in. Grabbed the permits, came back, I didn't have a ton of time. Dan and Chani had already eaten. I basically ate a Cliff Bar. And then we hopped in the car, and we were expecting to be back. I was like, no big deal. We were expecting to be back by lunchtime type thing. So we start off this hike, and as we're walking, it's beautiful, right? I mean, all of the hiking in that area is it's pretty stunning. So you've got, the red rock and all that kind of stuff. And so we're walking along, and, the idea that the walls, like the slot canyons were coming in or any of that, it didn't make any sense with the way the hike would start. And so we actually started kind of cracking jokes at Scott, because I was like, well, he must have climbed that tree and rappelled down that tree. Or there were parts where if you wanted to, you could, rappel off of, one of the faces, or you could just walk around, right? No problem. And so as we're cracking jokes and having fun with it, all of a sudden, all of the walls come kind of closing in. And it was pretty fast how quickly the walls came in. And then all of a sudden, you're now in a slot canyon. And then wham, there's just a drop off, right? So you're now in this slot canyon, and you walk up to the edge, and there's this drop off. And I'm looking at the drop off going, my grandmother cannot do that one hand over hand rappel. Actually, and I'm using that as an exaggeration. My grandmother probably can't. But the point I'm making is, anybody who has, is scared of heights, has never been rock climbing, never been rappelling or things like that, you're not gonna just hop in and drop down, let alone setting up all of the gear to do it and everything like that. This is not a casual day hike anymore. And so we're like, okay, so we set up our first rappel, we rappel down, It was dry enough that there wasn't actual running water at this time, but you could easily see that if there was still runoff and snow melt or anything like that, you would have been rappelling through water, just like Scott described. And so we kind of finished that first rappel, and we're kind of like just scratching our heads going, well, maybe Scott was right. What is the guidebook talking about? What is the dude at REI smoking? And so we continued on, and we hit another one, right? We hit another one where there was no way down but to rappel. So we did another one, and then we got to a point where, and because of all of the recommendations from the guides at REI and the guidebook, we only brought one rope with us. Now, speaking of the gear setup, that morning when we were getting ready, as we were getting ready, I gave Chani the compass and Dan the map, I believe, or Dan the map and Chani the compass. I looked at it, figured out where we were going, gave those things to him because we were splitting all our stuff up in packs. And we had the one rope, we had the compass, the map, and all the stuff, plus food and stuff like that. And we finally came up on this rappel where our one rope was not going to reach. There was no way. The drop off would have been 20-30 feet, and there wasn't enough water for us to make the drop. And so we had to do this crazy free climb down traverse scramble thing that was super sketch, because it wasn't like we were going back up. The only way to go was down, and now it's like Scott's story makes total sense. And the interesting thing that happened was in his tale, they got into the canyon, and the people that he was with, they quit on him. They basically refused to hike any further, which is super dangerous in a slot canyon, right? You don't want to be spending the night, because the problem with slot canyons is it can be raining 100 miles away, and all that runoff will come in, and what is 2 inches of water will all of a sudden become 30 feet of water in no time. And so you can't just look up and see that it's sunny there. You need to check to make sure it's not raining 100 miles away, because all that water is going to come rushing your way. So you don't mess with slot canyon. So they ended up spending the night in the slot canyon, and now I'm like, oh, okay, this makes sense. This was crazy. It was awesome. I mean, when I say crazy, it was crazy awesome, right? And I wished we had the second rope, because doing rappels that are that long is a lot of fun. So we managed to scramble down that last big kind of drop off, and then we started getting into kind of the water area where now we're in water, and the water's cold. It's all snow melt. And so we got to a point where now we're having to carry our packs over our heads because the water's more than chest deep. And you got to remember, Dan, you don't remember but Dan was like 6 foot something, right? He would take 2 steps, and I would have to take 10 steps just to keep up with him. And Chani and I were probably about the same height. And so when Dan was chest deep, I'm thinking like, I'm underwater. So both Chani and I looked at each other, and we were like, yeah, no. We put on our wetsuits, because we had brought wetsuits, because if there had been water the whole time, we would have been freezing cold because it's snow melt. So we threw on our wetsuits, and then we proceeded to traverse through all the waterways and in this canyon, and it was so cool. It was an amazing hike. It was and I can imagine that if we'd had full runoff and full water, but doing all those drops into the pools and everything with the water and everything, it would have just been a total blast. And I'm probably gonna have to go back and do that way one day. But anyways, after we get down and through, we finally get to the end point objective, which is this place called the Subway. And I was lucky and fortunate enough to get there. We got there just in time for the right amount of light as the sun was going down. Now, I just said sun going down, right? Remember, we were supposed to be back by lunchtime. The sun's starting to go down. So this was not a light hike, right? But we caught really cool light as the sun was just hitting that just the right level where I was able to get this picture. And it's, I was shooting with a Mamiya 7 medium format film rangefinder camera, and lucked out, actually got something in focus and everything like that. I'm standing chest deep in water as I'm taking this picture, trying to get it all set up and everything. So yes, I have all my camera gear with me as well as all the the ropes and the rock climbing stuff and everything like that. So get the picture, and then we're like, okay, let's head back for the car. And we get out of the subway and we start hiking, and we're kind of looking for the car. And it's a little bit deceiving because there's the trail, and then there's all these, it looks like trails that are running up to the sides of these red rock plateau cliff type things. And we'd been hiking for a while, and we were starting to think, this doesn't seem right. It seems like we should already be at the parking lot. Did we miss a turn? What happened? And so at this point, I turned to Johnny or Dan. I said, do you have the, let's get out the map and take a look at it. And he kind of looks at me. He was like, I kind of didn't bring the map. I was like, okay. Dan, you got the compass? I kind of didn't bring the compass. I was like, oh my God. So this is one of many lessons on this trip. And this is why I always carry my own compass and map now. Not that I don't trust others or anything like that. Not that this didn't make sense considering this is supposed to be a quick half-day hike and everything like that. I get it. No stress at all. But this is why I carry my own map and compass now. And also why a physical map, because your cell phone will die, right? Your cell phone will run out of batteries, or you won't get GPS updates and you won't be able to see where you are. So take both. But anyways, no map, no compass, just my memory of what we had saw. We basically all voted that one of these trails should have been the way up. And so we took the next trail up. Well, what we realized a couple things when we got to the top. And now we're basically on a plateau, on a red rock plateau, above a canyon. No idea where we are, none. And I am now bonking. This is the first time in my life I'd ever experienced what bonking was like, because I had only had, a mediocre breakfast. All right, I needed a full breakfast. Don't get me wrong, I love a good Cliff Bar, but I needed a full breakfast for a full day hike. Like I said, we thought it was only gonna be half a day. Then, I had, my Cliff Bars and stuff like that along the way, but with carrying all the gear and hiking up these mountains and all that kind of stuff, it was just too much, and my legs were bonking. So we got to the top, and we had a decision to make. Obviously, we did not see the cars. We thought we were gonna get to the top, and the cars were gonna be there. And the decision was, we can either go back down and keep going through the canyon, or we can hike that way. And that way was, I had looked at the map beforehand, and there were two mountains on the map that I remembered from the contours, and I knew that the road was somewhere in that direction, even without a compass. Sun's starting to go down, decisions are starting to get legit, and the problem was, I basically said, hey, I'm fine with either one, but I am not going to be able to make it down and back up again, because my legs they're bonking so hard. So whatever we decide to do, I need to factor that in. Like I'm not going to be able to make a climb like that again. And so we decided that we were going to hike across the plateau towards the road instead. And so many good lessons. This is where, I understood. I was so ecstatic and psyched that I was hiking with Dan and Shawnee, because they were both experienced hikers. and there was no talk of any of us quitting. Like, nobody was gonna quit. We were not gonna stop walking. We knew that would be like kind of the worst thing at this point. We had a general direction, and we had, a plan. And it was also starting to get cold. And so stopping would have been not great. But I also now understood why maybe some people with Scott had decided to ring out. If they'd never been hiking before, they'd never done anything intense like this before, maybe they were like, okay, I refuse to move anymore. So again, thankful to be with Dan and Johnny at this point. So we start our hike across this plateau, no idea where we are, and the sun's going down. So as the sun starts to go down, I'm like, everybody got their headlamps? And this is the next one. Johnny's like, yeah, I got mine, but I can't really remember the last time I changed the battery. Dan, same thing. So we are now provisioning our light because we don't know how long our headlamps are gonna last. So we're basically using one lamp at a time. And for the most part, it's pretty flat hiking. There's a little bit of ups and downs. And as we're going along, it's now pitch black. There's no sign of anything. And then sometime around 9 o'clock that night, we came across a fence. And there was rejoicing. There was much rejoicing. But at the same time, there was like, I wonder what the fence is for, etc. So we hop the fence and we're walking through. And as we're walking, we realized we were in a cow field. And so as we're moving along, we started doing stuff that was kind of psyching each other out. And one of the things that came up was, as we were walking, we got to a point where there was a cow in front of us somewhere in the dark. We could not see. It was insanely angry. And so we were like, we just started playing the game, the mental game. It's like, do you think there's a bull in here? And we were like, well, it's kind of late in the season. And then Dan's like, well, or Dan or Chani was like, well, maybe there's a cleanup bull in here, we don't know. And so a bunch of things happened at this point. We knew we had to keep going, but we knew this bull or cow was angry to some extent, and in the dark it sounded pretty freaky. And so we got out our headlamps and we separated them out, and we two things happened. There was a conversation. We first off, we basically pretended we were a car, all right? And we had the headlamps like car headlamps, and we were making car sounds, trying to pretend to be a car to get past these angry cows. Hopefully not a bull, but we didn't know. Now, as we're doing this, the jokes are starting, all right? And yeah, the jokes went something like this. If it's a bull and it comes at us, then, I don't have to be fast, I just have to be faster than you. And what happened was, normally, just from playing soccer together and everything, I was the fastest person. So I was gonna be okay. But they very quickly realized that because I was bonking, I couldn't run. I could barely walk. And so they were like, no, we don't have to worry about it. Both of them were like, oh, we're gonna be fine because Kevin can't run. And so, it's so, in the face of angry cows, I'm the sacrifice. So as we're pretending to be this car and we start getting closer, we finally realized that it wasn't a bull, thankfully, but it was a really pissed off mom because she had her calf with her and she didn't know, what we were about. And so we basically motored by, as a fake car, we motored by this cow and got through this field. And this was our first sign of civilization. And we're like, okay, well, we're still heading in the right direction. Now keep in mind, we have our headlamps, we have no map. The way we know we're still going, and I'm not that great with astronomy, I'm not using the stars. What I'm using is the silhouette of the two mountains against the sky. So I know, because we have the sky, fortunately there weren't clouds or anything like that, and I could see the silhouette of the two mountains against the sky with the stars and everything like that. It's one of the beautiful things about being out in without light pollution. You can still see things just even under starlight because we didn't really have a moon. And so that's how we knew which way we were going. And then, you know, the conversations were continued. You know, we all mentally, about 10 o'clock at night or so, 11 o'clock at night or so, you know, we had another conversation about, you know, we made the decision that we weren't going to stop. We were just going to hike all night if we had to. And the thing that I loved about that is, you know, we were in it together. It was cool. And everybody kind of just was on the same page. And right around, I want to say 11-ish, we saw a pair of headlights on the horizon driving down a road. And at that point, we knew we were at least going to find a road. And so obviously the horizon, depending on where you are, is anywhere between 3 and 8 miles away, or depending if you're at height, it can be even more than that. So we had still a good bit of hiking in front of us, but we finally made it to the road. I want to say it was about 11. It was right around 11:30 at night or whatever. And by some miracle, a car came by. We were able to hitchhike. Shawnee was able to hitchhike a ride up to the parking lot, or down to the parking lot, to grab his car. And then he came back to get us. So our quick little half-day hike turned into a pretty epic journey where we were pretty sure we were gonna get killed by cows, or at least I was gonna be sacrificed to the bull. And you know, it was one of those classics. I'm glad I was there with experienced people. Could have gone a whole lot worse, and we learned a ton of lessons that day. When we finally got back to camp, obviously we were smoked, crashed. We were supposed to do another canyoneering hike the next day. We were just too smoked to do that. Instead, we did Angel's Landing, which was still pretty intense, and stuff like that. But that is my killer cow story. Not so much killer cows, but that's also why, you know, I always, you know, as much as I trust the people around me, there's still certain minimum equipment lists that I carry with myself, including my compass and a map, even on short day hikes. So I hope you all dug it. Take it easy. Try to, you know, Rascal, if you're ever out doing these things, try to take some lessons from me, and, you know, make sure that even though it is only a half-day hike, you're ready for a little bit more adventure than you planned for sometime. Sweet. Have a good one.